All right. Good evening, everyone. I am Leila Logizico. I am the president of the City Club of New York, and I thank you all for joining us tonight for a discussion on the 2025 ballot measures. We're going to focus on proposals 2, 3, and 4. And our goal is simple. It's to clarify what these measures do, explore how they could shape land use and housing in New York City, and give you the tools to make an informed decision in November. We're also going to explore what we believe these measures do not do and what other issues have been raised about them. A quick note about our format. We will begin with brief opening remarks from each panelist, and then we will move into a moderated discussion, and then we will take your questions. So please drop your questions in the Q&A box at any time. You can start doing it now. You can do it during the event. If any of the comments that are made by the panelists, raise questions, please use this opportunity to actually type your question in the Q&A box. We will group these questions by theme, and we will take as many as your questions as possible. The session is being recorded, and we will share the link afterwards. It will be available on YouTube. So let's jump right in. I am delighted to introduce our panel. We're joined tonight by Andrew Berman, who is the Executive Director of Village Preservation, Laura Wolf-Powers, who is a professor of urban policy and planning at Hunter College and faculty in earth and environmental science at the CUNY Graduate Center, as well as Ron Schiffman, professor emeritus at the Pratt Institute of Architecture, a School of Architecture, and a member of the Atlantic Yards Community Development Corporation. So I am really, really excited to have this group of panelists, and we're going to jump right in. This is really a pressing issue. We are 15 days away from the election, and even less so from early voting, which starts this coming Saturday. So I'm going to turn it to Andrew Berman. Andrew, you have a presentation with slides, and we are ready for you whenever you want to start sharing your deck.
Great. Are you seeing it now?
We are. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Excellent. Great. Let me just adjust something slightly here. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to the City Club for having me as part of this esteemed panel. And I am going to briefly present about the 3 ballot questions, which from our perspective, if you care about democracy, affordability, or healthy neighborhoods, you will be opposing or voting no on them. And we have some more information for anyone who's interested at villagepreservation.org/ballot questions. And let me, hold on, advance the slide. There we go. So in terms of why we think the ballot questions will be bad on these 3 counts, it's because it will largely or entirely remove the legislative branch of New York City government from important decision-making, giving it all to the mayor or appointees he controls. And as we've all seen what an unchecked chief executive can do, I don't think we want to repeat that here in New York. Now, more specifically, the processes and oversight which these measures would eliminate from our system have typically been used to secure, as part of those approvals, measures such as more affordable housing, more deeply affordable housing, tenant protections, anti-eviction or displacement services, protections for small businesses and local jobs, fair wage and labor practices, increased infrastructure investments to handle the new developments such as schools, parks, healthcare, sewers, etc., and fine-tuning the rezoning for better results. Part of the challenge is that the language of the ballot questions is incredibly misleading. If the only information I had was what I read that appeared on my ballot, I would also vote for them. And there's a multi-million-dollar campaign going on to support their passage. But I'm now going to go through each of the 3 briefly and kind of hopefully illuminate what they would actually do. So question 2 has 2 parts. The first one just simply says it will fast track publicly financed affordable housing. And then part B says it will fast track applications delivering affordable housing in the community districts that produce the least affordable housing. Now, what does that really mean? So first of all, part A does not define affordable in any way. My understanding is that in terms of qualifying for it being in some way publicly financed, as little as having a tax break would allow it to qualify for that. So we're talking about an incredibly broad range of projects that would get this fast track with much more limited oversight and no approval from the city council any longer needed. Part B is the much bigger part of it with much, much broader implications. And it makes any rezoning application that includes mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH, not subject to city council review in 12 of 59 community boards. And it would be in perpetuity 12 of 59 community boards in New York City, which 12 would change every 5 years, or could change every 5 years, would always get this exemption from city council review. And these rezoning applications can be neighborhood-wide in scope, like the recent Midtown South, Jamaica, Soho, NoHo. It could include non-housing uses such as corporate offices, hotels, private university dorms, high-end shopping, etc. The housing can be 80% or more super luxury. The required affordable housing can be unaffordable to by far the majority of New Yorkers. And as mentioned before, it removes the city council's ability to negotiate for more or deeper affordability, tenant protections, anti-displacement measures, infrastructure investment, fair labor practices, or right sizing. It's important to note that the determination of these quote unquote bottom 12 community boards for producing affordable housing, which would this expedited process would apply to, how those 12 is determined would not count how much affordable housing exists in the community board, only what has been built in the last 5 years. The community board could have literally thousands and thousands of units of affordable housing. If they weren't built in the last 5 years, they get relegated to this list. It doesn't count rent-regulated housing as affordable, no matter how affordable it is. And it doesn't count how many rezonings the community board has had that have promised affordable housing but failed to deliver. And ironically, it then gives more unilateral control to the same entity, the mayor or the Department of City Planning, that failed to deliver on those affordable housing promises to do more of the same. Let's move to question 3, which says it would simplify review of modest amounts of additional housing and minor infrastructure projects. Here's what this really means. It would allow up to a 30% increase for any project that is residential, and it doesn't have to have any affordable housing requirements whatsoever. Most importantly, this comes on top of the up to 40% or more increase in allowable size of new developments that City of Yes just put into place. And because City of Yes was only passed a few months ago, we haven't really yet seen projects built under the expanded City of Yes allowances. Those will be coming in the months ahead, and they will be, in many cases, up to 40% bigger than what we were used to under old rules. If these questions pass, there could be an additional 30% on top of that. So we're talking about a 70% increase or more. So it could, for example, allow, we are battling this at the moment, a 538-foot tall luxury condo tower on West 13th Street, which consists of all of 35 super luxury, enormous luxury condos, to become 700 feet tall. And it might not even increase the number of luxury condos at all. It might just make each of them 30% larger. And then finally, we have ballot question number 4, which, as it says, would establish an affordable housing appeals board with the council speaker, local borough president, and mayor to review council actions that reject or change applications creating affordable housing. So here's what this really means. Right now, any rezoning application requires the approval of the city council. And as described before, the city council typically, in most cases, uses that to negotiate or often uses that to negotiate the kinds of changes that I described. It would completely remove the council from that process if the mayor doesn't want the changes that the council is asking for, or the council disagrees with the mayor about whether or not the proposed zoning change is appropriate, as long as he can get the borough president to go along with him. So again, these are for rezoning applications that can be neighborhood-wide, that can include non-housing uses, 80% or more super luxury for the housing. Required affordable housing can be unaffordable to by far the majority of New Yorkers, and all of those kinds of measures we discussed could be missed, could be removed from the process. Now, the proponents argue that this is necessary to counteract the ability of city council members to veto any affordable housing development. Those of you who have been following the council know, for instance, in the Bronx, a Republican council member there recently opposed an affordable housing rezoning in her district that was particularly actually for former Rikers inmates with serious health issues. The council voted to approve it regardless of what the local council member wanted. And ironically, it's actually the mayor who is now trying to kill that rezoning and kill that project, exactly the opposite of the dynamic that the proponents of this and the mayor claim are why these changes in the system are necessary. And the last point that I want to make is that it's important to understand that these changes would be virtually impossible to reverse because the mayor has the ability to supersede any other type of charter revision commission. In fact, that's exactly how these got on the ballot this year. So if the city council in a future year wants to convince voters that this was a bad idea, we should reverse it, we're going to put something on the ballot to reverse these changes, the mayor would be able to preempt them and knock their charter revision questions off the ballot because the mayor has that ability. So unless some future mayor says, I want to give up these powers that have been given to me, these are ones that we will be stuck with forever. So again, if you care about democracy, affordability, or healthy neighborhoods, we would argue you should be opposing these measures. And I will end my presentation there.
Thank you so much, Andrew. As always, you're the champion of giving us really, super dense information in record time. Much appreciated. I am turning now the floor to Laura Wolf-Powers. Laura, we can't wait to hear your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Layla. Thanks to the City Club for inviting me. Andrew gave a very thorough presentation of all three ballot proposals, and I'm going to focus primarily on Proposal 4, which is the one that would change the uniform land use review procedure in such a way that individual council members and the city council in general has much less influence on that. And that is the proposal that concerns me the most out of all of these. Although I concur with Andrew's points about 2 and 3 as well. But the reason that's often given for needing to end council member deference is that you have these recalcitrant council members who refuse to allow multifamily housing in their districts. They need to be they need to be overridden. But if you actually believe that, then actually Proposition 2 is helps with that in that it does allow affordable housing or commit to there being housing development in districts which had not seen a lot of it. So the ending of member deference, which Proposition 4 is focused on, really means kneecapping members of the council who, as Andrew noted, are trying to make the city's conditions on developers more stringent. Now, not just with respect to affordable housing, but also with respect to a whole lot of other things that the city is failing to do when it enables additional residential density. So that's improving resilience and flooding infrastructure. There's a lot, whenever there's a rezoning, there's very little attempt to sort of think about how the transportation system is going to be affected, how the water and sewer are going to, is there enough capacity for the additional residents? What about schools? All these various things. And so I actually believe that council members in progressive council members in districts where there's been a lot of community organizing and mobilization are a voice for the inclusion of more affordable housing, of using the most demanding parts of the mandatory inclusionary housing program. I'll say a little bit more about MIH, which I don't think is demanding enough. But, for example, Brad Lander, the controller, he now is saying that he's in favor of the proposals, but when he was a council member in District 6, he, or 39 rather, he was able to use the threat of voting no to achieve an enormous amount in relationship to the Gowanus rezoning, including $200 million of investment for NYCHA housing, $174 million of investment for sewer and other environmental protections, which were very important. And I know a lot of people didn't want, thought the Gowanus rezoning shouldn't have gone forward anyway. But I think that without the council member deference in place, it could have been a lot less. There would have been a lot less protection, and there was a lot. The maximum amount of affordable housing that was allowable under MIH is being built in Gowanus, and I think that has to do with the efforts of the council member, to be honest. And just to give a more contemporary example, there's currently a rezoning under consideration in Long Island City, and I was at the hearing a few weeks ago where council member Julie Wan had a panel of city agency representatives in front of her, and she had a list of things that such as had to do with park space, where there's very little park space per capita in Long Island City, and she wanted to see the Parks Department mobilized to do more parks development. She wanted to see stormwater infrastructure management. She wanted very specific commitments from the city to do that, and as well as a higher level of affordable housing. And again, there are a lot of there's a lot to say about the Long Island City rezoning. I personally am not in favor of adding all the luxury supply that rezoning is likely to do, but I think that the council member's role has been very important in holding the city to at least some account. So you might ask, well, if you don't want these proposals, what's the alternative? What's the alternative to, because you do have sometimes council members who are just, NIMBYs and trying to exclude any new development in their districts. And as alternatives, I would propose a fair share system, such as the one that is in place in the state of New Jersey, where municipalities are held to affordable housing goals, and each municipality on its own and through its own local planning process comes up with a mechanism for making sure that it is providing its fair share of housing that's accessible to people with low and moderate incomes. Another possible way of accomplishing this would be through comprehensive planning in the city of New York, and a comprehensive housing plan that would identify where land and density are available, and identify, where housing that's affordable to low and moderate income residents could pencil out. Though that's been talked about before, and I think it's a much more community forward way of thinking about how to create the affordable housing that we need. The last thing that I'll say is that it has to do with the mandatory inclusionary housing program. If Andrew, if you would show the image that that's, so this is not going to be very legible to you, but this is from the Association of Neighborhood Housing Developers. And basically it shows that 78.4 of the rent burdened households in the city earn less than $73,000, right? And the 60% of the area median income is $73,000. So really some of the most, even at the most aggressive, the mandatory inclusionary housing program is mostly serving people in the 60% of AMI to 80% of AMI range. And often it's 60 to 120%. So basically the housing that's being built through the MIH program is housing for households that are earning, $80, $90, $100,000 a year. And as I said, 78.4% of rent burdened New Yorkers are earning less than $73,000 a year, which just suggests that we are not in a system where private supply can provide the housing that New Yorkers really need. And so from that perspective, sort of taking, allowing the rampant development of housing, or just continuing the system by which developers are relied on, private developers are relied on to guarantee affordability, is not a strategy that I would advise any mayor, and particularly this next mayor, to pursue. So I'm hoping we can have a discussion about sort of what the city can do to make sure that it's actually providing, stimulating the production of housing that the majority of people with rent burden can afford. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. You make such important points here. Before we jump into our moderated discussion, I'm going to turn it to Ron Schiffman. Ron, share your thoughts with us. Ron, you're on mute.
Thank you. Layla, thank you for inviting me. And quite frankly, thank you for what you've been doing to make the City Club a relevant and important entity in exposing public policy or in discussing public policy in New York. I also agree with what Laura just said, said that at the outset, that a lot of what she said I may repeat, but I'll repeat it in a different way. New York City does not have a housing shortage. It has an affordable housing shortage. There's a dramatic shortage for housing suitable for families with 2 or more children. The Center for Urban Futures reported that households with 3+ kids dropped by 17% in the last decade. And they go on to really make the argument of why housing for families is really critical. There's also a dramatic shortage of housing for very low and moderate income New Yorkers. That was just pointed out in a way by Laura when she points to the AMI charts. The 2024 vacancy rate in New York City was 1.4%, a drop of 4.5% in 2 years, at the same time that we added 60,000 units to our housing supply in New York, a 2% increase. New York City's median income for a family 3 is now in excess of $145,000. As a result, the word affordability has become too general for our use. We need to be more specific and begin to target specific income quartiles. We can no longer just use the evasive word of affordability. Focusing on zoning and NIMBYism diverts our attention from the dramatic decreases in federal and state funding for housing production and housing maintenance, particularly targeted to very low and moderate income households. Those cuts have been instilled over the past few decades, and the growing dependence on the production of luxury housing to offset the cost for affordable housing must be addressed. It really doesn't work. Focusing solely on housing production, even with set-asides for affordability, as Laura points out, often results in the loss and demolition of existing very low and moderate income housing, with the resultant affordable units exceeding the ability of those displaced to pay for those units. In essence, the proposed charter changes would constitute a Trojan horse for luxury housing. Areas of New York City that have seen dramatic increases in recent housing production, like Gowanus, which I generally support, and the points that Laura makes out, that there were some benefits that were exacted, and those built in Williamsburg have seen significant decreases in the number of low and moderate income residents and a drop in the number of BIPOC residents in those communities. So just building housing that is not targeted to the lowest population and also is 70 to 80% luxury housing really will not address the housing affordability issues. The proposed charter measures sidestep issues related to both local and comprehensive planning and focus only on the quantitative issues of production and not on the qualitative issues of building quality communities, of community building, of livability, of education, transportation, open space, and environmental issues. If we take the city council members out of the equation, there still won't be, it will compound that problem. Relying on an appointed and politically accountable individual has always been tricky. All you have to do is look at EDC and ESD on the state level. For instance, members of the Board of Standards and Appeal do not have the people power to deal with the volume or quality of the proposal, and they lack the planning and community building know-how to evaluate housing proposals in a qualitative manner. All of these, I think, are quite serious issues and issues that we really have to begin to address. The proposals minimize the role of both the City Planning Commission and the City Council, which over time will weaken the city's ability to plan and develop and its capacity to coordinate and finance the building of truly well-functioning neighborhoods with schools, daycare facilities for the young and old, and economic opportunities for our multiracial, multicultural population to thrive. In this moment, when our democratic institutions are under attack by the federal government, New York City should not yield to the temptation of undermining our own participatory and democratic processes, pursuing the illusion of meeting our housing crisis. Our opening comment was basically, Andrew's opening comment was that if you care about housing, you will vote no on all these proposals. I would like to echo that. I really care about housing. I've been committed to housing and affordable housing and social housing for decades prior to this. And as you can see from my face, I'm an old man by now. But I believe that these efforts need to involve the state and the federal government in a very creative and proactive way. And by passing these, we're creating the illusion of developing a housing program and not addressing the fundamental needs of how we provide housing for low and moderate income families, and do it in a way that begins to desegregate our city and do it in a vibrant way. I really believe we should be looking at a social housing program, and one funded by the state and the city, and demonstrate to the federal government that we can do it, and do what early on Mayor LaGuardia did. He set the framework for what eventually became the public housing programs throughout the United States. We have to put New York City in that position once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. Fiorello LaGuardia, 90 years ago in December, inaugurated the first public housing in New York City with Eleanor Roosevelt. So this is the perfect segue. Let's talk about housing. And yet, if I understand correctly, what we're faced today is actually a zoning measure, right? It is not really a housing measure. It's not a housing policy, it's a zoning policy. And the premise is that things are going too slowly. So does the Charter Revision Commission have a point? Because my understanding is that what goes through ULURP, this environmental review that does take time, which by the way, ULURP takes 7 months, is only applies to buildings that are not as of right. And in New York City, because we have a zoning resolution and that the zoning resolution says, this is what you're permitted to do and you don't need to come to see us at all. Just, put it together, go to the Department of Buildings and, provided that you fit all these criteria, we'll give you the permit. We're actually not allowed to refuse the permit if you meet all the criteria. Now, if you want something different from what is in the zoning resolution, this is where this ULURP process kicks in. So maybe starting with you, Andrew, does the commission have a point? Does ULURP take too long?
Well, I think the point you made is central to the question, which is that it's critical to keep in mind that something like 90 or more % of all development in New York doesn't even require a zoning change. It just happens as of right. So none of these processes affect them at all. They just go to the Department of Buildings, get their permit. There's no discretionary element whatsoever. But even if you think that the process for the zoning changes, which this would affect, need to be streamlined as much as possible, this would change that time frame by a couple of weeks at most for projects that typically take at least a couple of years to build, and for rezonings that typically have ramifications that play out over the course of several decades. So eliminating a couple of weeks in the approval and review process is minor by comparison. The big change that it implements is it removes the city council from the system of the necessary review and approval. And as I said, overwhelmingly, the result of that will be less affordability, less deep affordability, less investment in infrastructure that's necessary to support the projects moving forward, and a whole range of other things that we really want and need in our neighborhoods and our city.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And the proposal number 2, which is actually bifurcated, which that alone I struggle a little bit, because what if you agree with part A but you disagree with part B? How are you supposed to vote anyway? Beyond that, this notion that in perpetuity there's going to be 12 community districts that will basically be exempt from ULURP, because it's the nature of a ranking that, there will always be a bottom 12, even if they're really performing really well, even if they are, very close to number 13, that is, exempt from this measure. It's a little bit, there's something a little bit unequal here. But furthermore, when you look at the districts that would be impacted by this measure, if this measure were to be implemented today, you count the Upper West Side and the Upper East Side. The Upper West Side today is the densest part of the country. It has a lot of very, very large buildings, and while a number of these buildings are luxury housing, absolutely, it also has a really, really large number of rent-regulated, rent-stabilized, and public housing. So how do we reconcile that? And maybe I'm going to turn this question to you, Laura, because we may end up with unintended consequences there. Laura, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think it's it's relatively easy to sort of picture council members who want, do not want any change in their districts, who want to maintain a single family zoning, which has had, in the past been racially exclusionary, and to think, well, that those council members, they don't deserve deference because they've stood in the way of improve, of building that can improve but not only their own neighborhoods, but the entire city. But I was listening to Andrew talk about kind of the criteria for selecting those 12 council districts. That gave me some pause, in the sense that, as I guess he pointed out, that there was not going to be any consideration for the amount of affordable or rent stabilized housing that already was in the neighborhoods, and it was only about what they had done in the past 5 years. And I think that so certainly the method for identifying the districts that are lagging, or the districts where maybe prejudice and NIMBYism is a serious issue, that certainly needs to be a little different than apparently the process would be under Proposition 2.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And then on Proposition 3, which is this expedited ULURP, they call it ELURP for expedited rather than unified. And, in that instance, in high density neighborhoods, any project that would pile on 30% additional density would be or less would be considered modest, and therefore would be exempt from ULURP. So turning this question to you, Ron, is 30% increase in density, is that modest?
Not only modest, it is somewhat dangerous, because when you're going to many of the neighborhoods, the major problem that we face is that we don't have a housing policy, and we don't have a way of protecting the existing low and moderate housing that exists in those communities. So in certain areas you may go, and in order to build at the higher density, the developer will try to accumulate and assemble a number of other sites, displacing maybe 15 or 20 families of very low or moderate income, replacing them with 20 new affordable units in the 100-unit building they'll build on that site, but at 2 to 3 times the income requirements of the people that are being displaced. The displacement effect of that particular project and its impact on low and moderate income families is very, very dangerous. And I think what we should do here is not to begin to continue this policy in New York of creating housing through zoning and giveaways, but look at developing a comprehensive housing policy for the city of New York. Begin to work with the state and the city, using some of the resources we have untapped to begin to finance a social housing program. Doing what I sat for 6 years on the City Planning Commission, and there was never a time that I experienced a slowdown due to ULURP. Slowdowns occur for a variety of other reasons. The idea that the developer may be more interested in something else for the moment, running into another kind of a problem, running into opposition once it's been approved, in fact, may delay the project even further. I think it's important to understand that every time we've tried to expedite New York City, we wind up going slower. Atlantic Yards is a great example of it. And there are other developments in Queens that come to a grinding halt because we try to expedite it and we don't go through the democratic processes of gaining community approval. And I think what we've got to do is begin to develop our own housing programs, begin to think about this beyond zoning regulations, and start thinking about how we use our untapped stock transfer tax and begin to put it into building low and moderate income housing, providing communities of quality, not just creating housing to store people in. And that's what we're doing. Everything is now looked at in a quantitative measurement, not in a qualitative. We don't look at how are there enough schools, or is there enough daycare centers? Is it safe to send down a child in an elevator that is on the 45th story of a building? They're proposing a building across the street from Atlantic Yards, from the Barclays Center, that will be 910 feet tall. And they are even discussing it as all affordable housing. It's pure, unadulterated bullshit. We have to begin to develop a housing program that engages the people in the communities in a substantive way and meets our needs for families and for low-income folks.
Yeah, no, very true. So going back to the democratic issue that these ballot measures are raising, we heard a lot about member deference. Is that the law? Is there a law that says that we need to defer to members? Because my understanding is that, it is the practice, but it is not codified. And therefore, the city council could very easily took it upon themselves to fix this issue, if indeed this is the issue. Maybe going to you, Andrew.
Yeah, and I can speak to this as a former chief of staff of a member of the New York City Council. This notion that every council member has the unilateral ability to veto any project in their district that they don't like is just not true. I gave the most recent illustration in the Bronx of the Republican council member who was opposed to the affordable housing. I've seen other cases where the council has voted against the local council member. What you don't see, what happens behind the scenes much more frequently, is that a council member may well not want to support this, but they know the council is going to vote for it, whether they support it or not. So what they do is they work within the council to try to get something done to the project that makes it more palatable for them. In many cases, it is the deeper or broader affordability. Sometimes it's adding housing for seniors. Sometimes it's adding those infrastructure investments. And so often what happens is there may be a council member who is in fact reluctant to vote for these things, but they know it's going to get approved with them or without them. So they join the process to get it approved in the form that they believe is the best one possible. But let me also just say this. Even if you believe that there are council members who do have this unilateral ability to stop these projects from happening in their district, you have to also believe that there are many more members of the council who are fighting to get those projects to be more affordable, with deeper affordability, to include more people, and to be better investments for the city. And there's a lot more of them than there are of the ones that you might say you believe are fighting to prevent the affordable housing from happening, and you're going to cut all of them out of the process. I think that any objective view of the city council as compared to the mayor over at least the last 40 years has been that on the whole, the council is typically more progressive than the mayor, not less. And that's the body that you're going to be removing from this process.
So that actually leads to my next question, which is, isn't that incredibly dangerous to actually create a tool that is actually a pretty blunt and sharp at the same time tool? Because, can we live with this tool being in the hands of a NIMBY mayor? And, I hate the terminology altogether, but we understand that, this is being pushed by, a movement that calls themselves YIMBY, whatever that means, under the guise that, we need more supply. But, the truth is, if this tool ends up in the hands of a mayor who wants less affordable housing, what is going to happen? That mayor would have the ability to actually do exactly that. He would have the BSA deny every single application, and then when we are on Prop 4, any proposal that would go to the city council would then be objected to by this panel. Isn't that incredibly dangerous for housing production itself? And maybe I can turn this one to Laura.
Yes, and I think there's a lot. Nobody loves ULURP, or at least I haven't encountered a whole lot of people who adore the uniform land use review procedure. I mean, every process that is created institutionally can be gamed, and everybody is very comfortable with the current ULURP process. People have their roles. There is a kind of ritualistic enactment of the environmental impact statements, which always tend to underestimate the displacement impacts. To Ron's point, I mean, I am not a huge defender of ULURP as it currently exists. I think one thing about it that is good is that, particularly if people are organizing at the community level and putting pressure on their council person, they can get their council person to, advocate prior to the approval of the zoning, for a lot of really important elements of infrastructure and for greater affordability, as Andrew was saying. But I think I'm not opposed to the idea of replacing ULURP with something that doesn't just kind of look at every single rezoning kind of as a one-off, but in fact takes the whole city into account and looks comprehensively at what the needs are and what the population changes have been and what the, who's rent burdened and how to address their needs. And I think that's a lot more logical as an approach than ULURP, which simply kind of goes case by case with this development in Brooklyn, this development in Queens, and it's always just about that project. And that's very much like against the spirit of planning. Like, planning is about taking things taking the big picture and the long view.
So I think that since MIH, which was in 2015, we have not had a housing policy enacted for the city. We've had many zoning policies, some of them very broad, City of Yes being one of them. And there's actually a question in the chat asking what is City of Yes. So, for some of us who eat that stuff all day long, we totally take it for granted. But City of Yes was a major citywide rezoning initiative that Mayor Adams introduced. And it came actually in 3 phases. The first one had to do with resiliency and climate change. The second one had to do with economic development and, was already a little bit controversial. And then the third one had to do with the housing component where, it ended up passing. But it was a huge deregulation step in the regulation of housing rules, zoning rules for development production of housing. One of the main criticisms of City of Yes was that there is no affordable housing mandate. There is a preference, so a developer could choose if they prefer to actually go ahead and build more, a taller and denser building that would contain affordable housing, but there is no mandate and requirement. So that's for a little bit of an explainer on City of Yes. But what happened to housing policies? And maybe I can throw this one at Ron. Why are we not able to actually propose and enact housing policies if the problem is the housing, if the crisis is housing? And I think we all agree on that. Right? We all agree that housing is the crisis, but more specifically, we all agree that affordable housing or housing for very low to low and median income is the crisis. Right? So Ron, why are we not able, why have the succeeding administration not been able to put a policy on the table?
Because for decades, the City Planning Commission in New York views itself as a zoning board and not a planning commission. we need the City Planning Commission and the city planning staff to have the mandate that they develop a comprehensive citywide fair housing plan in addition to a program to meet fair housing goals. They're slightly different. Where do we build the housing? And if we came up with a physical as well as programmatic way of intervening and developing housing throughout the city, so we're building healthy and viable communities, because housing alone isn't what we need. We need healthy and viable communities where a family trusts their kids can walk to school, could go to a daycare center, hopefully, which will be universally free, and actually be able to afford to live in this city. I want to go back to your question a moment ago. I'm not concerned about a mayor who may be an advocate of NIMBYism. I'm concerned about a mayor who will use this new tool to advance and expand the luxury housing supply in New York City to meet the needs of the top 2 or 3% and to meet the needs of the real estate developers rather than of the people of the city of New York. And I think what we need to do is get a planning commission and a mayor who are committed to a policy that you're suggesting, that we really come up with viable neighborhoods that are compatible with the existing neighborhoods, that protect the housing supply we do have. What really was Koch's first step, which he was forced to undertake by community groups, was to preserve the existing housing supply and stop the loss of low and moderate income housing falling out from the bottom. Once he stopped the decrease in housing, he was able to add to the housing supply by converting a lot of city-owned properties. Today, we have to do that creatively. We have to use our powers and generate the resources to make sure we have affordable housing. Housing is not affordable to the average person any longer. It has to be subsidized in one way or another. If you're wealthy, it exists through the tax system. You get homeowner deductions. You have a variety of sources. If you're very poor, you sometimes used to get public housing. We need to make a universal way of making sure that housing is no longer a commodity, but a social good, and recognize that first and foremost. And if New York City can elect a mayor who has the guts to begin to do that and use New York as a model, maybe we can help rebuild the nation as an equitable democracy where all of its people are treated fairly.
Ron, do you believe that HPD has a role to play?
Absolutely. But they have a role to play as a developer. The planning process really has to begin with the City Planning Commission and how they locate properties and how they meet the needs. They never met they refuse to address income levels. We really need to develop an aggressive way of coming about housing that is affordable and accessible to everybody. And mandating that housing meet the needs of every quartile of our population, I think is a way to start. And I think we could do that.
Great. So I just want to take stock that we were joined by 178 participants, which is really very, very exciting. We are joined by a member of the staff of the commission, Adam Brodheim. I want to thank him for that. And we've received a number of questions. I'm going to take a few. The first one from Ben Ratner, who is asking, in the past decade, just 10 council districts have had more housing built than the other 41 combined. How do the panelists propose we address this glaring inequality? Andrew.
Well, first of all, I think it's appropriate to view that in context. And I forget if it was Ron or Laura who mentioned this before, but so a couple of the districts that have been produced the least new housing are the ones that are already the most densely built up with housing of any place in the nation. So yesterday I was actually walking on the Upper West Side, and I was noticing actually a number of new buildings. But other than where those new buildings were, every other site was developed with a 10, 15, 20-story building full of multiple units of housing. The only way to build more on those sites is to destroy the existing housing, which in some cases has rent-regulated units, and in other cases is simply impossible to do. If it's a co-op or a condo, that building's going nowhere unless all, 50 residents of the building decide collectively they're going to sell the building for development. So it's really not realistic to say every single community board in the city is going to build the exact same amount of housing. Some community boards have more opportunities for more building, and in most cases, the cases where there have been the greatest concentrations of new housing are areas that were formerly industrial, the zoning was changed because the industry was either leaving or no longer had the political, sort of pull that it used to have. And the city decided we're going to give this over to a new kind of development there. But when you have very densely built up areas of the city with housing already, it is extremely difficult, and I would argue, in fact, undesirable to try to promote very large amounts of new development there, both because in some cases it's just unrealistically dense, and in other cases because the only way to do it is to destroy good housing that you do not want to lose.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Robert Stern asked, there seems to be a desperate call by some of our once reliable progressive elected officials to increase housing supply at all cost, implying that if voters reject the proposals, no affordable housing will be built. How do you account for this? Laura, do you want to take this one?
I think that the real estate sector is very powerful in our city. That's not a controversial thing to say. And I think that a number of progressive officials have acted in a tactical manner, which is to say that they've seen the polling, they've seen that because of the way that the propositions are worded. Andrew himself said that if he didn't have information about what was behind these proposals, he would probably vote for them himself because they're all about affordability and adding affordable housing and so on and so on. So I think that that some officials have decided, tactically speaking, that they're going to go along and endorse these proposals because it's easier not to incur the wrath and the ire of these very powerful people in city politics. That would be my explanation.
Great, thank you. That's actually a good segue for the next question from an anonymous attendee who asks, have members of the City Council expressed a position on the proposal? Maybe Ron or Andrew, do you want to take this one?
Well, I know that the council institutionally has actually been waging a very vigorous campaign to educate the public about the harm that these ballot measures would do. And there are certainly some individual council members beyond the leadership who I know have been very vocal. In our neighborhood, Chris Marte. So there's definitely been some pushback, certainly from some members of the city council and from the council as a whole in terms of why this would be so incredibly harmful.
Yeah, it's interesting that Kevin Riley, Councilmember Kevin Riley of the Bronx, he is the chair of the subcommittee on zoning and franchise, and he's been very robustly in favor of affordable housing, and he came out against those ballot measures. Which, certainly for me, it was really telling to see that, someone who is so pro affordable housing would see the dangers of these ballot measures. We have A question from Francisco Lebron: should a future of new affordable housing in New York City include a publicly owned housing developer instead of solely relying on private for-profit developers? Ron, maybe you want to take this one.
That's a good one for Ron.
You're on mute, Ron.
The answer to that is absolutely. And I think we should go further. We should try to implement some of the proposals that are now on the floor on the state level to create a social housing program and use that in concert with many of the very capable community-based housing organizations that exist throughout the city. And I think that's one way of really addressing the problem. The other is also to use some of the money to allow for the subsidization of families to move into existing housing units in some of the dense communities throughout the city. I think we have to start thinking creatively. One of the things that we're going to be doing, I'll give you an example. There's a proposal by the Economic Development Corporation in the Brooklyn Terminal Market area in Brooklyn to build 6,000 units of housing. And through the advocacy of some in the community, they've set aside 40% of those units to be affordable. But those affordable units will cost 2 to 3 times what it would be to afford to build it elsewhere outside of that site because of the environmental mediation requirements that are necessary on that area, plus the fact that we will be pushing out the maritime industry in the city of New York. So we have to look at this not only in a quantitative way, that's essential, but in a qualitative way. What kind of communities are we building? How do we stabilize communities around the city? How do we make sure that we get rid of our upper income enclaves and really create more affordable housing through subsidization? The city, why not allow a city or not-for-profit entity to buy units and rent them to low and moderate income families in some of the housing units that are scattered around the city in wealthier areas. There are lots of ways we could do it. It costs almost $500,000 to build a new unit now. There are ways that we can, I think, find ways of doing that in a much more equitable way and create a much more a much better housing set of policies for the city of New York. Zoning does not do it.
If I could just add to Ron's.
Oh, Laura, you're freezing. Your internet connection seems to be a little slow.
Would have the capacity to borrow. I'm sorry, did I get frozen?
You did for a quick second. Start again.
Okay. Emily Gallagher, the Assemblywoman, has 2 years running proposed a social housing development authority in the state legislature. There's that entity would have the ability to borrow. That could really be have great potential. Another thing that is sometimes discussed is the fact that the newly created NYCHA Preservation Trust also has the ability to build housing, not public, to build housing that targeted to people with low and moderate incomes. There is a land bank proposal that's recently resurfaced in the city council. An interesting idea is possibly to transfer distressed buildings whose landlords have kind of given up on them and stopped maintaining them into a land bank, and then using city funding to rehabilitate the units in those buildings so that people who are, because another issue is that people who are living in affordable housing or housing that they're not paying very much for are often living in very unsafe conditions and not in healthy dwelling units.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we have time maybe for one more question. Let me see. Okay, it's actually the last one seems to be. Okay, so it's coming from an anonymous attendee. The proposals are written in an astonishingly biased manner, several sentences supporting yes, then the no very short, and the ambiguous use of longer time, not defining how long is longer. Many assume longer is yours. Is such biased wording, which is written with partiality, even legal?
Well, it's certainly been challenged. I know that the city council tried to get the Board of Elections to not allow them to go on the ballot because of the deceptive language. They ultimately did. I've heard that the governor may have intervened to try to make sure that that happened. And I do understand that there is a lawsuit going on about this. And Leila, you might be even better positioned than I to sort of speak to that. But I just want to say that I do think this is very much based on trying to give the public an impression that is inaccurate of what these would do. Dovetailing on the prior answer to the question, if your interest is in greater affordable housing, you should absolutely be voting no, because these will hurt it. And the types of measures that this really will help bring about are these market-driven rezoning approaches that rarely, if ever, bring about the kinds of results that they promise. And all this will do is eliminate a very important layer of oversight from them and allow the mayor with a much greater degree of unilateral authority to be able to impose these zoning changes throughout the city. And I would just say to everybody, think of who our last four mayors were: Eric Adams, Bill de Blasio, Mike Bloomberg, and Rudy Giuliani. Would you want them to have had more power to unilaterally make land use decisions for our city? Or are you grateful that there was at least some additional layer of oversight there? That's really the way we need to think about this in terms of moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. So we're getting to the hour mark on our program. So I think that it's a good moment to give, sort of like closing statements. If you have to give like 30 seconds to give advice to voters, what would you advise them to do on those proposals? Maybe starting with Ron.
I would just suggest that they vote no, and but stay involved and be an advocate for low and moderate income housing and a policy that really can be fairly developed.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Laura?
I would also recommend no votes, and particularly on proposal number 4.
Thank you. And Andrew?
As will come as no surprise, I would strongly recommend a no vote on 2 through 4, and not just because they're not good enough, they're bad. They will make things worse in terms of affordability, in terms of democracy, and in terms of healthy neighborhoods. So while we're all craving for the silver bullet, not only is this not the silver bullet, this is a slow poisoning of the system. Just say no.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to really thank all the participants who came and joined us tonight to listen to this webinar. I hope you found it informative. I certainly did. I'm very grateful to the panelists, Laura Wolf-Powers, Ron Schiffman, and Andrew Berman, for helping us think about these issues. They're very technical. They're complicated to grasp. There's obviously not been enough education around them. Everybody is focused on this little mayoral election. We certainly appreciate it, but make sure that when you go to vote, because of course, go and vote. That's the most important part. That goes without saying. When you are there, flip your ballots. don't forget, flip your ballot. The ballot proposals are at the back, and make sure that you circle this little bubble and vote no on 2, 3, and 4. For full disclosure, the City Club has joined an amicus brief actually challenging these ballot measures in court. I concur with the panelists that they are really problematic. Democracy is a good thing. It's messy, it is complicated, it is far from perfect, but it is a good thing, and it only works if we have checks and balances. So in this process that, once again, nobody loves ULURP, although, I have made a promise that my next pet will be named ULURP, but that's really, the only reason why we would contemplate, petting it. But at the same time, it is baked with all sorts of checks and balances. It's also an opportunity for the public to be informed. There's a number of public hearings, including a big one at the City Council that draws large crowds and really is an opportunity for the public to be educated and be informed. So these ballot measures would eliminate that. Once again, when you go and vote, have democracy at heart. And cast your ballot accordingly. Thank you so much to all of you. I'm very grateful. The City Club, as you know, is a non-for-profit organization. If you like what you hear, please consider making a contribution. We rely exclusively on contributions from people like you, and we're very proud of that. So please consider helping our mission. You can find more information about us online, cityclubny.org. And with the replay for this event will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Thank you again, and have a good night.
Thank you, Leila.
Thank you.